One royal signature. Sometimes, that's all it takes to change the future of an entire family. For years, most people have believed that the royal titles held by Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie are completely safe. The common view has always been simple. If anyone wanted to remove those titles, Parliament would have to approve it. It sounds straightforward. It sounds settled. But what if that isn't the whole story? What if the truth is far more complicated than most headlines have suggested? As public attention has stayed fixed on Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson, another debate has quietly been growing behind palace walls. This one isn't really about scandals. It's about power, tradition, and the future of the monarchy itself. More importantly, it asks a question that could shape the next generation of royals. Could Beatrice and Eugenie one day find their positions changed, not because of anything they have done, but because the monarchy itself is evolving? Many royal watchers have repeated the same claim for years. They say a monarch cannot simply remove the title of prince or princess. According to that belief, such a move would require a lengthy political process involving Parliament. It's an explanation that has been repeated so often that many people now accept it without question. But when constitutional experts look more closely at how royal titles actually work, they often reach a different conclusion. And that's where things become interesting. To understand why, you have to go back hundreds of years. Royal titles were not originally created by Parliament. They were created through the royal prerogative, a collection of historic powers held by the sovereign. Throughout British history, kings and queens have issued official documents, known as letters patent, deciding who could be called prince, princess, or His or Her Royal Highness. Those decisions came from the crown itself. So if those titles were created through royal authority, could they also be changed through royal authority? That single question sits at the center of today's debate. This is where much of the public confusion begins. Many people mix together two completely different issues. One is royal titles. The other is the line of succession. They sound connected, but legally they are very different. And that difference changes everything. Why does it matter so much? Because one follows rules that the other does not. The order of succession is protected by acts of Parliament. A monarch cannot simply decide who will inherit the throne. Any major change requires legislation approved through Parliament. That safeguard has existed for generations. But titles and royal styles have historically followed a different constitutional path. According to guidance from the House of Commons Library, they may be affected either through legislation or through the royal prerogative, depending on the legal circumstances involved. In other words, not every constitutional question follows the same process. That distinction is often lost in public discussion. Once people hear that changing the line of succession requires Parliament, they naturally assume the same must apply to every royal title. But constitutional scholars repeatedly point out that these are separate legal questions. They may overlap in public debate, yet they are governed by different constitutional principles. Could years of reporting have blurred that important difference? Many experts believe exactly that. Another source of confusion is the Titles Deprivation Act of 1917. Whenever discussions about removing royal titles appear, this law is almost always mentioned. As a result, many people assume it is the only legal path available. But historians say that isn't quite right. The act was introduced during the First World War under extraordinary circumstances. Its purpose was to strip British titles from individuals who had supported enemy nations during wartime. It was never designed as a general tool for modern royal disputes. Because the act is mentioned so often, many people have come to believe it controls every discussion about royal titles today. Yet constitutional historians argue that its relevance is limited. It dealt with a unique historical crisis, not with questions surrounding today's monarchy. That leaves another important issue. If the 1917 Act isn't the complete answer, then what powers still exist today? The answer isn't as simple as many expected. The debate gained fresh attention during proceedings in the House of Commons. A direct question was asked about responsibility for royal titles. The response was short but significant. The leader of the House stated that questions relating to royal titles are primarily a matter for the king. It was a brief answer, but constitutional observers immediately took notice. While legal experts continued debating exactly how those powers could be used, the statement reinforced one important fact. The constitutional picture is far more complex than many headlines suggest. Just as those legal questions were gathering momentum, another issue suddenly entered the spotlight. This time, it had nothing to do with constitutional law. Instead, attention shifted toward money and royal housing. And that unexpected turn pushed Beatrice and Eugenie into an entirely different conversation. In June 2026, the National Audit Office released findings that renewed public discussion about housing arrangements involving members of the extended royal family. According to the report, Princess Beatrice was living in accommodation within St. James's Palace, while Princess Eugenie was living at Ivy Cottage on the Kensington Palace estate. On its own, that wasn't especially unusual. Members of the royal family have long occupied crown properties under different agreements. But another detail quickly became the focus of public debate. Neither Beatrice nor Eugenie is a working royal. Both have careers outside official royal duties and do not regularly represent the crown. That led many commentators to ask whether existing housing arrangements still reflected the monarchy's modern approach to accountability and financial responsibility. Were long-standing traditions keeping pace with changing public expectations? That question soon became impossible to ignore. The National Audit Office noted that some housing arrangements involve adjusted rental agreements rather than full commercial market rates, depending on the specific circumstances of each property and occupant. These policies have existed for years, but renewed attention prompted fresh questions about transparency. Reports also suggested that some property valuations used to calculate rental arrangements had not kept pace with London's rapidly rising housing market. If those figures were outdated, should they have been reviewed sooner? Then came another revelation that fueled even more discussion. According to published findings, the costs associated with some of these housing arrangements were reportedly met through the Privy Purse, funded by income from the Duchy of Lancaster, rather than being paid directly by the princesses themselves. Suddenly, the debate was no longer just about royal titles. It became a conversation about public accountability, finances, and how a modern monarchy should operate. Buckingham Palace did not deny that different housing agreements exist. Instead, it explained that arrangements vary depending on the property, its purpose, security requirements, and the circumstances of individual occupants. Even so, critics argued that greater transparency would strengthen public confidence. Others countered that royal housing is far more complicated than newspaper headlines often suggest. So who is right? The answer depends on which side of the debate you find more convincing. For King Charles, the timing could hardly have been worse. Since becoming monarch, he has consistently spoken about creating a smaller, more streamlined royal family. Modernization, efficiency, and financial responsibility have become defining themes of his reign. That broader vision now faces fresh scrutiny. If housing arrangements remain unchanged, critics may argue that modernization is being applied inconsistently. But making changes could create another problem entirely. Some observers believe any major changes affecting Beatrice and Eugenie could appear unfair. After all, neither sister has been accused of wrongdoing. Much of the attention surrounding them has grown out of controversies involving other members of the York family. Others believe reform should apply equally across the wider royal household, regardless of personal circumstances. It's a delicate balancing act, and every decision is likely to be examined closely. Looking even further ahead brings another important figure into the picture. Prince William has often been linked to the idea of an even leaner monarchy than the one King Charles is pursuing today. Reports suggest he places strong emphasis on transparency and limiting official support to working royals. If that approach continues in the future, housing policies and the role of extended family members could change significantly. But will that vision eventually reach Beatrice and Eugenie? Interestingly, many commentators believe the sisters became part of this debate almost by accident. The wider discussion originally centered on Prince Andrew's residence at Royal Lodge. As public attention spread to other royal properties, questions naturally expanded to include housing arrangements across the extended family. What began as one controversy gradually evolved into a much broader conversation about constitutional powers, public spending, modernization, and the future of the monarchy. That leaves Beatrice and Eugenie in an unusual position. They now find themselves at the center of debates they did little to create. Public expectations continue to evolve. The monarchy itself is changing. And discussions about the future role of non-working royals are becoming increasingly common. Could the sisters decide to shape their own future before circumstances force the issue? Some royal experts believe they should. Former BBC royal correspondent Jenny Bond has suggested that voluntarily stepping away from royal titles or styles could allow the sisters to take greater control of their own public image. Instead of waiting for changes imposed from above, they could choose their own path. Supporters of that idea argue it would allow them to focus on their careers, charities, businesses, and families without constant constitutional debate following them wherever they go. History offers at least one example. Princess Patricia of Connaught, a granddaughter of Queen Victoria, gave up the style of Her Royal Highness and the title of princess in 1919 after her marriage, with the approval of King George V. Historians often point to her case as evidence that royal titles have evolved over time. But can events from more than a century ago really be compared with today's monarchy? Many constitutional experts urge caution before drawing direct parallels. Others strongly disagree with the idea of Beatrice and Eugenie stepping aside. They argue the sisters have done nothing wrong and should not lose titles they have held since birth because of controversies surrounding other relatives. Both women have built successful careers outside royal duties while maintaining relatively low public profiles. From that perspective, fairness matters just as much as modernization. There is also a practical consideration. The royal family is much smaller than it was a generation ago. With fewer working royals carrying official responsibilities, some commentators believe future monarchs may eventually need support from beyond the current core group. If circumstances change, keeping Beatrice and Eugenie within the royal framework could preserve valuable options for the future. When all the evidence is considered, a balanced picture begins to emerge. Most constitutional experts do not expect the sisters to lose their titles anytime soon. At the same time, debates about modernization, housing, financial transparency, and the role of non-working royals are unlikely to disappear. Those conversations may continue for years as the monarchy adapts to changing public expectations. In many ways, this story is about much more than two princesses. It reflects a larger question facing the British monarchy itself. How much should tradition change? How much should remain the same? And as one generation gradually hands responsibility to the next, what kind of royal family will emerge? The answers remain uncertain. But one thing is clear. The future of Beatrice and Eugenie may depend not only on constitutional law, but on how the monarchy chooses to redefine itself for the decades ahead. And that may be the biggest royal story of all.